over edition journals. That's really those big ones. And that day that I was reading, I would go out and take a walk, and then I would respond to them. So there's a few poems in the beginning and the end of the book that are kind of those responses. But it's also about conversations with my family and heritage, and also and it's called Shylands because I'm shy and I come from a very shy culture, and I think this is a culture, this country is all about kind of the bully pulpit, and I wanted to kind of respond to that a little bit too, and that, you know, it's okay to be shy, and there's a lot of shyness going on in nature and in her as well. So I'll just try to see if I can read this within the time frame. Cut me off. So the first poem I'm going to read is called, called Riding the Bubble. This is the time the nucleus that formed near the birth of the solar system a few billion back shows up again. Its infrared signature over the night sky, 3 miles across. How do we imagine that? Out in the deepening night in our pockets of isolation, staring at the stars, we lift eyes to comet smudge. This is the business of silence, pursuit of an echo back to our hunting and gathering of the elusive, its beautiful fizzing out as the new moon comes. What is this shred of silver, nightly whisper of the past, but a way not to feel as haunted in the full-throated dark? A buoyant syllable scripted, should we choose to read it. Maybe we all have a bit of flat earther in us when we look up, tiptoe to our own edge and gaze out. Oh, we have flat. Let us praise stamps, maps, lily pads. But who hasn't taken a miniature globe in the hand and thought how improbable this puzzle of water and rock, an apocryphal round in its extreme, rounder than a calabash or muscadine. Those NASA photographs of the Earth make it look like a good rupture, like a bubble. And so it is. As we were dragged again into enlightenment, drawing back more curtains to face how humans play pretend like nobody's business. The mind that perceives a comet or a wildfire, a grievance, or the full round Earth doesn't have to then just turn away, but keep perceiving it in waves that then radiate outward and bump into others' waves to form some kind of silent conversation in the way trees talk, as a way to make it all bearable, to keep practicing it like a good old blues tune that carries water, that tends deep wounds, that rides a wild arc called the future. So it seems like I was going to read a few gardening kind of poems because it's gardening season. So this is sort of a gardening poem. It's called Wondering What. Wondering what this country would look like through the rearview mirror past Wall Street and its pirate cargo hold. What would it look like in improbable balance? A harvested heirloom crop of our last code of ethics. A walk away from the hunger for history, sweet frosted. Thawing of truths packaged up nice and square and hidden in the freezer aisle. What would it be like to all kneel in the garden of no border? Bank the long beans, invest in catalpas, mutual fund salsa of all those tomatillos, weigh the equity narrative of the wisteria, follow the penny diminuendo of hummingbird, full-on revenue off those blackberries, sip every retirement fund syllable of pomegranate, forever withdraw savings from the jukebox of the mockingbird. Allow that kind of liquid warboarding, harm, graduated over into the transmuting light of maybe a lily or a penumbral moon. A greedy hope beyond the damage. To fall not from division or betrayal, trail, that fall is in some kind of love to tender spaces, lush, a different kind of flavor. One of the things that kind of struck me during the pandemic was that, and I knew a lot of people who had COVID and lost their sense of smell, and it came back, but for some people it did not. And I just thought of that whole concept of the memory and how we store things using all of our senses. So this is a poem called, and this is what we need to be smelling right now, petrichor. Petrichor smells different on different lands. Remember wet sand, dead bullheads, Marlboro butts, copper tone, greasy popcorn, cherry chapstick, dried out honeysuckle, wet turtles on the beach at sundown, cool damp underwear on the line, sun-soaked billowing bras, clover rubbed into knees and elbows, somersaulting down the evening hill. The mango, pine, lemon smoke of the weed, caught in every seam. River water, skin on skin, lying together naked in a field of sweet William. Pineapple and rum of the dark pink crabapple, happy drunk asleep under blooming lindens. Bright, sharp spines of stars and spruce. Boot crunch, wintergreen, frost over drain frog. Rain on concrete, rain on ponds, rain on any child's hair. Memory and scent, a catch and release and catch again. Breathe in, add to the catalog of desire and fragile detail you carry. A distant whiff of sometimes a resilience somewhere. So I brought my phone up to tell me what time I started, but then I don't remember. So sorry. So let's see. I thought I would read. This is also the time of traveling. We could travel again, I guess. And so this was a trip that I took with my daughter kind of right before the pandemic. It's called Souvenir. It's about Iceland. It is hard not to take the country with you when you leave. Mud on treads of shoes, mineral dust nestled into pores. It sits in your pockets, the sharp rocks and strange words. Its taste practicing new truths on the tongue. Its rain absorbed where you are thirsty. The memory of its sun opening you up like a ripe piece of fruit. In this country, you try to leave something behind, new grief. You tuck it into your suitcase to then try to pack it down with the hiking boots into black lava sand, thick as coffee grounds. Toss it out into fields of moss-green boulders, last rolled into place 300 years before. Drop it onto hillsides too profuse with wild lupin. They could surely hold another sad bruise of color. Release it into the sky with those turns that circle and dive your head as you walk along a shell-crusted path towards a lighthouse with the world's smelliest dog and one lone sheep. But instead, you and your daughter place it gently into the field with the horses, who eat the wildflowers and the sadness of strangers. And you sleep the sleep of a late setting sun, a yellow bit of air you carry in your bones, a different kind of souvenir. So Matthew, are you keeping track?
Yeah, you are sitting at about 10 minutes right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No pressure, though.
No, I can probably stop right now. I'll read probably maybe one more. I guess I'm going to read one about my parents. educate growing up, though they weren't going to teach any of us the language. And it was always kind of in the food, maybe, if they weren't too freaked out, because they went through my mother was raised in a communist home. So when the McCarthy era came through, it was really hard. You don't admit any of that, right? And so they were so busy trying to blend in and be Americans, and they were Americans. My dad served in the war, blah, blah, blah. But, so my dad was a fisheries biologist, and my mother was a high school teacher who became a poet at age 60 and put out 7 books and was a translator and editor, and she just kind of did a, okay, this is what I'm really supposed to be.
Could you turn the mic up a little?
Oh, okay,
Yep, I got you.
do you got it? Sorry, can you hear me at all?
Yeah.
Probably it's fine.
It's better.
No loss.
How's that?
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got this nice wind screen, so. So anyway, yeah, so that's who they were, and so this poem is called American Dream. Mine was a family of lukewarm consumers. I was told by ardent junior high schoolers which were the right jeans. Best hiking shoes, proper flannel, optimum rucksack. It was the 70s. Did I have these? To splurge, we ate at third-tier fast food joints. Our Rambler, a humble brown, to subterfuge rust. Best time often spent as a family was going to the library. My parents were modest, bordering on pathologically shy. They spoke to each other in a tongue historically built from sung poetry. Their American dreams involved praying to all things found in forests, taking the Tao of suffering and the garden of never fitting in and building a mysterious melancholy. Sparse beauty found in silence. Where then does capitalism fit into the life of any child of these people? A junkie for reverie, sure. An inheritance of paper in all its many forms. Piles of moldering boxes of music and books left to fend for themselves amongst basement spiders is their testimony. If my parents were to share a symbol of a flower as partners, it would be the water lily. My father, all river, creek, pond, his name meaning lake, walking hip deep, boots all mud, focus on beginning, the start of things, the roots. My mother, all upward motion, opening to any damn sun she could find, to speak into the sky, sparks of written word. 2 elements, water to air, their dream. Thank you.
Okay, this is poetry night, it said. This is a prose poem, an epic prose poem. And I'm just going to read the first few pages, saving me the trouble of contextualizing anything at all. The Hoffmans had been living in Costa Rica 3 weeks when the thunder of drums started. At first they thought it was real thunder echoing in the mountains around them, then found it was a percussion band from the high school down the road from their apartment. 20-some drums, snare to bass, marching, shaking the air with their pounding. Rat-a-ta-ta-ta-boom, rat-a-ta-ta-ta-boom, rat-a-ta-boom, rat-a-ta-ta-ta-boom, boom, boom, boom. Every day, all morning sometimes. It was the same with the other liceo in town. It was the same with the schools in San Jose, 7 kilometers away. It was the same for all they knew from the Nicaraguan border to the jungle frontier with Panama. Drums beating furiously, practicing for Independence Day, September 15th, 1989. Close up, it was not all drums. In each band, a few girls with glockenspiels tinkled melodies against brief silences of the drums. but the drums were what mattered, boys pounding them, thunder from taut skin overwhelming the nervous struck silver. A block away, it was all thunder. Every day Ted would run into the bands marching in Escazú's steep streets or see them on the razor wire guarded roof of one of the schools, practicing before the afternoon rains began. Even Saturdays, the kids were in their school uniforms, navy and sky blue, navy and white, marching and drumming, young teachers drilling them with whistle blasts, hour after hour, rat-a-ta-tat-a-ta-boom, rat-a-ta-boom, boom, boom. Explosive and disciplined, it was the most nakedly warlike music he had ever heard, the hard throb of armies marching in a country that had disarmed itself 40 years before, outlawed its own military. Viva Costa Rica! Boom! And Viva el 15 de septiembre! The country was covering itself with flags, congratulating itself on the freedom handed over to it 168 years before. Viva la Independencia! Neither asked for nor generally desired by Costa Ricans at the time, much less won in battle. Somos libres. September 15th, 1821. Fed up, exhausted, Spain cuts loose her Central American colonies once and for all. It takes a month for the news to arrive from Guatemala, carried by a relay of messengers traveling not only by day, but straight through the night, guided by lanterns. Boom. Ted loved the violent, paradoxical music, monotonous and infinitely varied, numbing and intoxicating. He couldn't get enough of it, would stand on a narrow, broken sidewalk listening for hours if his wife or kids weren't there to drag him back. Aren't you going out to the farm? Monica asked him as he and Valerie, their 4-year-old, were about to leave on an errand that would draw him into the path of one of the bands. Monica had their 4 chairs upended on the table that separated the kitchen area of the second-floor apartment from the living room and was sweeping the mysteriously dented wooden floor with a broom they had inherited from previous tenants. The floor looked as if someone had beaten it with a ball-peen hammer or danced madly in stiletto heels. He stood in the door with Valerie tugging him toward the stairs. It takes forever to get out there without the car, he said. Anyway, Alejandro needs to feel he's running things now. I'm not Cal Richardson. He saw something skeptical in the tightness of her shoulders. What? She had her wild black hair restrained in a ponytail that hovered restlessly over her bent back as she swept. The handle of the old broom was too short for her, but she worked it doggedly as if their lives depended on her cleaning up a mess she usually didn't even notice. It's just that maybe you shouldn't take so much for granted, she said. He waited for her to stop sweeping and look at him, but she kept working relentlessly around the table legs, pursuing cereal and toast crumbs from the kids' breakfast. She was still wearing the sweatpants and faded red t-shirt she slept in these days, and her bare feet were pale against the dark wood of the floor. Her breasts swayed against the fabric of the shirt. He said, Richardson's problem was he didn't trust anybody here. Last thing he said to me before he left, he's standing right in front of Ana Rosa. He says, Teddy boy, you don't know what you're up against with these people. If it ain't nailed down or locked up, it's theirs. Ana Rosa's sitting right there at her desk, as perfect English. Monica groaned, closed her eyes. Cal Richardson was an old friend of her father who had invested a lot of money in a flower farm Richardson was starting in Heredia, a little north of San Jose. Checking on it during a family vacation in Costa Rica a few years later, Ted had found the business floundering, Richardson hostile and ready to throw in the towel. You're right, she said. You're probably right. I'll get Valerie out of your way for a while, he said. You can get some work done. Meaning work on her dissertation, though he didn't say so. She was looking around for the dustpan. He followed Valerie down the stairs to the garage, which had housed their battered Volkswagen Squareback during the 7 days it had run for them after they had bought it for too much money, their worst mistake since renting an apartment too far from the flower farm. A load of laundry was chugging around in the old washing machine in a corner of the garage. Once it stopped, Monica would come down and start hanging clothes on the lines Ted had strung across their little concrete courtyard. He didn't think she would get to the file box containing her long stalled dissertation. She would finish the laundry, then sit at the table and drink coffee. She might pull a chair out onto the balcony and read a novel she'd picked up at the used goods store in San Jose, where they had bought most of their furniture. He didn't know how to mention the dissertation without sounding pushy. Clanging the garage door closed behind him, he took Valerie's hand and walked down the rocky dirt road that led to the Liceo, where the band was already drumming. Beyond the row of red-roofed stucco houses on their right and a high concrete wall on their left, topped with broken glass glittering in the sun, they reached a place where a towering stand of trees threw the road into shadow, and an overgrown coffee plantation stretched down the mountain foothills below them. A jungly house on stilts stood among the trees. It was built of bamboo and thick, raw lumber, and an open deck on the second floor jutted out toward the road. Behind the deck was a screened and louvered treehouse-looking structure roofed with sloping panels of faded green fiberglass. Beneath the house, among the log stilts, a 20-foot-long dugout canoe lay overturned, as if it had been dragged up from the brown rushing stream in the gorge just beyond the house. Near the bridge that crossed the stream, Ted had noticed a pile of branches that might supply him with a suitable farol stick for Stephen, his 9-year-old, who needed it for an Eve of Independence Day program at his school. Cutting the stick was all Ted was going to do. The boy would have to make the lantern himself. The mimeographed assignment had come home with the usual splendid greeting, Estimados padres de familias. Stephen hadn't been very helpful in explaining the project. Even back in Cincinnati, where he had finished 4th grade the previous spring, Stephen never talked about school. It was hard to tell how he was doing now, how much Spanish he was learning, whether he had resigned yet to being wrenched away from his home and friends. He went to school, came home at 2:30, read again and again the superhero comic books he had smuggled down in his suitcase. So far, the only thing he seemed to have picked up at school was a breathy, maniacal laugh he must have learned from one of his classmates. The laugh sometimes drove Ted a little crazy, but he tried not to be critical. It was he who had persuaded Monica that the boy should go to a theoretically bilingual Costa Rican school rather than one of the English-speaking international schools. They don't want the kids to speak Spanish, he had raged after an interview with the principal of one expensive academy. They used to not even allow Spanish on the playground. She said they don't forbid it anymore. But why did we come down here? For Stephen to get to know a bunch of rich brats speaking the master language? Neither of them would have been able to say exactly why they had come. They had drifted into the decision in a mazy sequence of propositions, hope taking them by the hand, showing them where to sign their names. It was business, they would say, a chance for Ted to make a fresh start. Monica could get her dissertation going again. It was a favor to Monica's father, who stood to lose his $100,000 investment unless Ted got the flower farm untangled from the mess Cal Richardson had made of it. It was an educational opportunity for Stephen and Valerie they couldn't pass up. A chance to rebuild their marriage, still cracked and precarious a year after Ted's affair. Those were their reasons, what they told themselves. Yet rumbling beneath whatever they could say or think, crushed by depth into something like silence, a voice had murmured, "Save yourself, run, there's a sickness around you, greed, violence, desire, pride. Save yourself, save yourselves and your children, run." And they had run, though they never would have called it that. Obeying a voice they didn't even know they had heard. And they were running still, though they thought they had settled down now in this quaint mountain town, this peaceful country, safe as Switzerland. Thank you.
All right, can you all hear me okay? Thank you for coming out on this beautiful summer night, and thanks to Matthew Majorson Quinn. I'm going to be reading from my book of poems called Boy. I'll just say a couple words about it so you have some context. It is a sequence of poems, meaning it's supposed to be read in order. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It tells a story that starts in my childhood, and this is the story. In 1972, when I was about 9 years old, my parents divorced in March, and then in June of that year, my brother, who was the only boy and the youngest of the four of us, fell down the stairs to the basement and died the next day from a brain hemorrhage. And so, all of our lives took a kind of a turn from there, and followed me into my adult life as things do. I have 3 boys of my own, so the poems do not have titles. They're numbered, so I'll just pause a little bit in between, and you'll know that I'm starting a new poem. I'm going to begin with the first poem, which is meant to be a prologue to the collection. Imagine a mirror dropped and shattered, a certain beauty in the fragmented, mosaicked wreckage. It appears arranged, purposeful, artfully confusing. That is illusion. Nothing fits together. There's no surface, just images lifted and hurled against each other. That's how it is with fractured memory, the past. Not to mention the bad luck it is to enter. It's like a crime syndicate. Even casual involvement will cost you your innocence. I didn't break the mirror. I wouldn't choose to rummage. My face is hidden, even from myself. You can cut yourself open or see something that is not there, trying to retrieve or repair. Maybe a cobbled version of that boy's life will emerge if I crawl long enough, mustering the faith of the doubtful. The moon, that big, innocent eye, was wide open the night he was born. It saw the beefy boy arrive face up. A year later, its image lit up the blue face of a TV, blurred by the strange motion of men wading through air so thin they nearly lost control in it. It was a slim, dipping moon that night, a winking moon, knowing. It knew that in just 3 years, it would cast its full light down on the boy who'd knocked his head so hard he'd never get up. That evening, the moon would shine so brightly it could blind. Memories are like this. Beach full of sand piles blown flat. Funerals also. Fields of collapsed senses. A child's house of blocks scattered. You were closed off because your gauze-wrapped head would have kept everyone from prayer. Early July, breeze blowing in from open doors flanking the altar. My father, yours, hunched over in a pew, head resting on one hand, snot and unintelligible words draining from him. Almost infectious, no one bothered to touch him. The priest had a catch in his voice, trying to attach meaning to your death, while I cried into a plaid shirt. Later, hands fumbled us toward dry ham sandwiches that clogged our throats. Even bird song tacked to air scratched our ears. It hurt to hear and not to. Your absent voice, the echo of that final song the singing priest chose because he couldn't know any better. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season. Turn, turn. had time to every purpose under heaven. His objects are hidden all over the house, bare in the closet, sealed in plastic. Cowboy hat in my mother's headboard cubby, the plaid shorts and yellow shirt he wore that last Father's Day, stashed somewhere. We have nothing. No money, barely any words. We keep his name to ourselves. But we secretly unwrap that dumb bear to rub our hands over its worn fur. The funeral has passed. We are intact. Our babysitter comes as usual. Nothing is usual. On the table, a stack of cards splits open to reveal a stack of money. 5s and 10s riffling in the air. Gone that stout, blue-eyed boy with his plaid shorts and cowlick, but this, my little sister exclaiming, "We're rich!" We laugh because it's not true, because the truth is so plain. The world pulses outside the window. Apple blossoms, and robins, and a yard that needs mowing. All this, whether or not we close our eyes to it. September came with its flagrant announcement of destruction, flamboyant death clothes. We returned to school. Cool air bit our bare knees, tossed our hair into frenzies. 4th grade was here, where math turned suddenly incomprehensible. I knew that everyone knew I was -1, banked on their embarrassment. Who would ever ask, "How are you now that your only brother is dead?" To ward off even silent pity, my chin would rise to ridiculous heights. I'm fine. Distant, smiling. They could look at me and never see anything resembling the truth. I mentioned that I have 3 sons, and so I'll read a couple poems, a little bit about that. So many ways to fall. Carrying the laundry basket. Step, slip, thump on the butt. How I fell 8 months along. Or the forward lurch, one heel snagged in the hem of a Christmas dress. Clothes and shoes flung outward. My pregnancy preceding me by half a step. 2 out of 3 times it happened. No harm to either boy, but the abrading of hope, waiting to feel movement. The stories repeated long afterwards, so the endings couldn't suddenly change. They will devour the centers of bread and bologna, cast the hollowed circles to the linoleum, and you will let them. They will grab handfuls of dirt from plants and scatter it, refuse to pick up toys or sit close to you when you read, and you will let them. They will write on the walls, and later will write papers that will make you sick at their indifference, and laugh when you try to help. And what choice do you have but to let them? They will get jobs because you cheer them on, even buy them a car so they can leave you more efficiently. They will tell you, "It's your fault I'm not doing my homework." Will stop reading anything. They will make you the butt of jokes you don't understand. They will buy you nothing for Mother's sake, and you will always let them. of fun to laugh at our distorted shapes in the mirrors, all the varying forms curved surfaces can make of us. Which double selves and broad faces are most hilarious? As for me, I am drawn like a moth to the concave mirrors, wherein I grow smaller than any person should be, and, depending on the angle, though I don't understand the physics, disappear completely. And I'll end with this poem, which is the last poem in the collection. I am still surrounded by boys, now men. Such a relief, my comfort. We make a circle in our complicated devotion, not unlike the moon, snagged in the branches of my shaggy pine. I step outside to admire such luminous girth. It floats, weighty, translucent, beautiful, so low I could almost. But that would ruin the awe that escapes in its simplest form, a single expelled breath. Oh, testament to what I love but can never touch.
And now we have time for questions.